as an anchor reporter. She's an award-winning journalist and broadcaster. She brings nearly 20 years of experience in the television, radio, print, and digital platforms. Prior to joining CTV, Seth anchored Global News, weekend broadcasts, and for more than 13 years, she was the face of Omni Television's South Asian News, where she covered world events, including the assassination of the Pakistani Prime Minister, Benazir Bhutto, and the 2008 Mumbai terror attacks. Seth launched her broadcasting career as a reporter for Omni Television upon graduating from the University of Toronto with an honors bachelor degree in political science, English, and philosophy. During her tenure at Omni, she led coverage on top stories such as the 9/11 terror attacks and the Air India trial in Ontario. She also hosted and produced 2 entertainment programs, iStyle TV and Bollywood Boulevard. In 2013, Seth joined CBC Radio as a freelance news anchor while maintaining her parenting blog, masalamamas.com. Today, she continues to write her own column entitled Out and About with Angie Seth for Desi News magazine. Please give a warm round of applause for Angie Seth, your moderator. Angie, to the stage, please. Hello.
Go ahead, please.
So I hope you guys don't mind, but we want to keep this kind of as conversational, comfortable. I'm not interviewing any of these lovely people, but they're here to talk to me, and they're here to talk to you, which is amazing. I think I realized I didn't turn my mic on. Bad habit. Can you get to say boys? Boys. Ooh. That's a little scary. Okay, welcome everybody, and welcome to my guests. Okay, if you don't mind, and forgive me if I do pronounce your last names because we just met incorrectly, but I believe right next to me here is Deri Latimer. Okay, everybody, big welcome to Deri. Do we have Dr. Samke on Skype at all? Or is the doctor not joining us? Oh, no, maybe not. Okay, I'll get the thumbs up on that. Dr. Kevin Alderson, welcome. Nick Davis, welcome. And Juri Puligandala, right here. Now, before we begin, and this is a really critical topic when we're talking about mental health, and the workplace, and what's missing, what's being done. I'd love each of our speakers to reintroduce themselves and give a little bit of background. Are you guys okay with that? Okay, perfect. Over to you, my friend.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Deri Latimer, and I'm, my profession is a professional speaker. So we're often known as motivational speakers. I've been doing that, had my own business for about 30 years. But I come into the mental health space, so my background was in business and human resources. So I've always cared about workplaces, but because of some occurrences, some things in my life, I became really connected to mental health. So the first occurrence was the one that drew me to human resources. That was passing of my father just after I graduated high school. And I remembered at the time thinking, you know, work shouldn't kill people. My dad really died of stress, and I didn't even know what stress was at that time. So onward to university, I'm going to change the world, study HR, and I'm going to, make a difference and make workplaces fun. I don't know how long you want, but I have to say it since you gave me the mic. But after that, no, I'm gonna keep it short. I won't go on and on. But through again other things that occurred in my life after that, I just continued to be more and more ingrained in the mental health space. And speaking, my specialty now is the word I use is resilience. So as opposed to looking at reducing stress, I look at building resilience. So that's what I speak on and study voraciously.
Do you guys have a mic as well, or are we sharing?
No, we all have our own.
You've all got your own, but you've got a handheld. Okay, fair enough. All right, go ahead.
That's it. That's enough for now. You'll learn more.
Nick, go ahead.
I'm Nick Davis. I'm the Executive Director of Equity and Inclusion at CBC. But I started my career as a journalist in 1987. And the thing that kind of got me to raise my own awareness about mental health around journalists, and it's a big topic right now around some of the, the harm, online harm with journalists, and the things that a lot of organizations are doing to try and help support journalists, especially with the mental health aspect of the work and the stress that goes with the work, some of the PTSD that comes along with it. But when I first started as a journalist, I didn't really understand the impacts of covering some stories until I had to cover the Paul Bernardo case. I was a crime reporter back in 1995 when that case came on. A lot of the stuff we couldn't report because there was a ban on the courts on what we could publish or put in the papers, but we had to see that stuff every day, see the videotapes and see the evidence. And you kind of go through it and you think, wow, it's an amazing opportunity to cover this trial. But, over a period of time, and that trial lasted a few months, and it was, and we'd seen stuff before that, you realize that it's really hard to look at that stuff and unsee it.
Well, it never goes away.
Yeah, you can't unsee it. And it wasn't until I started covering some other crime stories when I realized the impact that covering that case had just on me personally.
Yeah.
And I have a very good friend who works at CBC, a guy named Dave Seglins. And me and him got to talking when I started working at CBC, and I know he has gone through some of his own challenges covering stories that have been really hard to cover. He did a lot of stuff with the police and a lot of the intimidation tactics the police did against him, and really made him really fearful about doing his job. And we had a real good talk, and we realized that we were damaged people,
Yeah.
and we didn't realize at the time. And kudos to Dave Seglins. He's doing a lot of work at CBC right now to help support journalists through some of that. And so I just want to talk today about some of the things that we are doing here at CBC, just around not only just supporting journalists, but supporting all our employees, because around mental health issues, and it's just something we never took seriously.
Well, we
as a
never
company.
talked about it.
Yes, for
And
a
just to
long
give
time.
a little bit on Nick's side, when you talk about police officers and first responders, et cetera, and Nick can attest to this, there's stuff that we see that you will never see.
Never see,
But we will never unsee.
Yeah.
And we're talking about around the Iraq War, around 9/11. Just to give you an idea, covering the Gujarat earthquake, sitting in an edit suite with the editor, counting, trying to find footage that don't show bodies.
Yeah.
So determining feet, and is it a child? Is it okay? Can't show that. And you do that for hours, and then you go home and you're supposed to have a regular day. But eventually it sits in. Yuri?
Wow. Yeah, okay, Giri. So I'm executive director with the Canadian Mental Health Association, Edmonton region. So there's about 86 or 87 CMHA offices across the country, serving 330 communities. So I came into this role about 2.5 years ago, but about 23 years ago is when I started on this journey. At that time I was working for the Schizophrenia Society, and I had met some family members and people living with schizophrenia, and I prior to that I thought I knew everything about, well, not everything, but I was an undergrad, pharmacology, and so I thought I knew about the drugs, I knew about the physiology, but in my head I had this image of what a person with schizophrenia looked like. And then I was very surprised when they were essentially the same as me, and then with the big difference being that I had a future and I had hope and they didn't. And it was like at that time there was a switch that went off in my head that this isn't fair, this isn't right. And then so kind of long journey, mostly in the nonprofit sector here in Edmonton, related to mental health, family caregiving, housing homelessness. Spent a little bit of time on the other side of the fence in government. But ultimately it is about, or what drives me is that we all need to know much more than we do about how to respond to each other. I get very frustrated when I hear stories sort of after the fact. Oh, I should have noticed. Oh, I should have done something. I'd noticed something was wrong, but I didn't know what to do. And I just feel like that is like, it's 2023. Mental health is the biggest issue that's facing all of us, and really we all need to be able to respond to each other, and that's my lesson for workplaces.
Well, we were hit with it for at least 3 years, right?
At
It's
least
right in our
that.
face.
Yeah.
Dr. Kevin? We're going to call you Dr. K.
That's fine. Hello, everybody. You can hear me okay through the mic? Mic is working? Anyways, I'm involved in quite a few things. I'm just wrapping up a textbook that I've been working on for 2 years. It's a generic counseling textbook. I'm a professor emeritus of counseling psychology from the University of Calgary. Do professional speaking, and I talk quite a bit about diversity, occasionally about diversity in the workplace and mental health in the workplace. I'm quite disturbed by global events that impact all of us, and by the Gallup poll that's done every year, which is showing that overall we are becoming more and more unhappy globally. And there's good reasons why this is happening, but there's also good things we could do about it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, you can see the experience. It's going to be a great discussion. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't have my watch on me, so can one of you lovely ladies just like jump up and down and be like, stop talking? That would be great. That way, because we could go on for a while, I think. So, Nick, you touched on this a little bit with your time at CBC in terms of giving people a real sense of what it is like in the workplace. And we all can say that we love where we work. I love where I work, but it can be wherever you are. There can be a level of toxicity. It can be a toxic environment, and then the question is what do you do about that, and what is work going to do about that to help you? So I want to start with you first, Nick, if we can, talking about the Bernardo case, talking about the bombardment of things as a journalist that you experience, because bottom line it comes down to, here's a story, here's your deadline, we need a minute 30 from you for radio, TV, and now in this case we need online. Yeah. And you're there and you're, okay, I gotta go get this, and you wanna get the best stuff, the best clips. We're gonna say it, the media stuff, because that's what people will read or listen to, but we never talk about when Nick goes home and he has a moment to regroup and what's going through his mind. So workplace, give us a sense.
Well, it's back then when I was covering Bernard 95, nobody thought about the things that we're talking about right now.
Right.
Like no one, you had to have thick skin, you had to have a certain temperament to cover these stories. This is how you got to get the news. And if you weren't feeling good one day because you're just overwhelmed with what you're thinking, there was a problem with you. There wasn't a problem with
suck it up
work.
and move on.
Move on. And I will say, even though I'm talking about that an example, there's lots of other kind of smaller examples. Just like, imagine if you go to work every day and you're bombarded with microaggressions every single day. Yeah. Every single day. And over a period of time, they take a toll on you psychologically. You start to think that nobody cares about you, nobody wants to hear what you have to say, no one respects you, you're not being heard. There's all kinds of feelings you go through. And so I'm not trying to say, as reporters, we go through things, we do go through things that are pretty drastic, but I even think the smallest things over a period of time have an impact psychologically on our employees. And I think as a company, for a long time, we kind of looked the other way. And it wasn't because of people not understanding or caring, and maybe that's part of the reason, but I think the main reason is because I don't know if we had a definition of what mental health was like. And I think whatever our definition of it was it's like someone running down the street with their clothes. It wasn't little things, That's why I think as employers, one of the things that we can do It's just expand our definition of what mental health is. Like, what is it? Like, and what does it look like? And how do we spot it early? And how do we make sure that we are understanding when one of our employees is going through some type of stress? And how do we identify that? And how do we do some proactive things to prevent things? Like, we know there's things we can do. Like, at CBC, we have all these courses now. One of the courses is about images, like how we handle like graphic images. And as journalists, like, I never got that course in 1995.
Oh, God, no.
But now when you come in, part of our onboarding is that. Like, and the thing I'll say before I let someone else say something that we can do as employers is think about our employees from the moment we hire them to the moment they retire. Like the full life cycle of somebody from their onboarding to their retirement, and what are we as a company doing about their mental well-being, also their physical well-being.
Yeah.
I don't think we think about that. I mean, we're starting to now as a society because, you know, right now the stats say, 1 in 5 people struggle with mental health issues. And so now we're starting to think about it, but we have so much work to do in this space as employers. And we need to take care of our employees if we want to have the outcomes we want in terms of profit and better stories and better everything.
We have to stop making it a negative thing, like a bad thing. Deri, when you mentioned your father and that example, and you said, you know, I realizing what happened to your dad and now what you've sort of moved on to continue to do, hearing what Nick is saying and sort of seeing what the environment is now. And I think, you know, and I have to bring it up, COVID kind of really put that in our face when we realized, you know, your fundamental ability to live was taken away, and you realized how it affected you. So from your perspective, when you're looking at what we need to do in the workplace, what we need to recognize, as Nick has mentioned, the microaggressions, recognize how it affects members of our diverse community as well, women, people of color, what would you say?
Yeah, I think 100%. We need to continue to do more work in workplaces. I think there's so many things we can do. I think some of the language around the area of mental health is it pulls people away. People are in the away mode. You know, they're afraid. So who wants to have a disorder? You know, like, I'm not going to proudly tell someone that, you know, I have a disorder. I think we can change the language and in society, but that helps in workplaces too. So I work with leaders all the time, as well as the people in the individuals in the organization. And what I have found over and over and over is again is that leaders have heard, oh yes, there's stigma, and they understand that, but they still don't have any language that helps them, useful language that helps them to then overcome it. I think if we start changing our language, and that means all of us, about, because all of us have mental health, just like all of us have physical health. But it's interesting that sometimes if someone's struggling, they'll say, oh, well, Deri has mental health. And it's sort of like, oh, Deri has mental health. You know, it's kind of like that, right? Have you ever heard that from someone?
Oh,
right? So the more we talk about it and normalize it, so I just had a horrific experience in the pandemic. Trauma from my early life was triggered, and I was out of commission for 8 months, and that was the first time in my life that happened. That was about trauma. So when people ask me, well, what happened to you, Deri? I, in fact, wrote a book about it. What happened to you? I said, I had a trauma that was triggered. I don't say, oh, I experienced some months of anxiety where I couldn't eat or sleep or function or read a book, and then I probably had some depression because I couldn't get out of bed. I didn't say that. I said I had trauma that was triggered. And then people will go, oh, what trauma? And the trauma for me was I ended up married someone right after university, and 8 months later he died by suicide. And this was in 1987. Talk about no information. I could not find one article, book, anything on suicide. So I think let's start looking at our language. And I mean, if someone says that, you know, Deri has mental health, it's okay for you to say, sure. I mean, we all have mental health, just like we have physical health. But if Deri's struggling in some way, let's talk about how we can support her, how we can help her, whatever might be going on. And I just did, I'll finish real quick, but I had the honor of doing an amazing program for, and I know they won't mind me using their name, Best Buy Canada, because they're so fantastic. And it was about having a conversation about mental health. So I was able to design it for their whole leadership team. What do you look for? What are the little signs, those little micro signs? And then how do you start the conversation? And it is so easy for all of us to learn how to do that. You don't have to know the details of what the person's going on, is going on for that person, but just to notice that there are some things you can, little whispers before that person gets really overwhelmed.
Dr. Kevin, I want you to jump in on this, because sort of in the research that you're doing, how does all of this sound to you in terms of what you've been able to find? And when you couple that in to BIPOC societies, how is it different?
So much of what we are seeing is actually preventable. And so, if we take a preventative lens, we can help people stay healthier. But we do need to reorganize a few things. Gallup Corporation in the United States has been doing a annual poll, every year since about 2005 or 2004. They basically get data from at least 130 countries. And so at this point, they have data on nearly 2 million individuals. And so they have found a few things that are really important. One is that 70% of people's satisfaction at work can be predicted by who their boss is. And most of you here have likely had a boss at some point in your career who was outstanding, who made you feel supported, who made you feel like you belonged. Coming to work was a joy. And many of you have also had the other type of employer where you fear going to work. At least in Canada, it may not be true in other countries. If you're employed in a full-time position and your boss at work is not treating you well, there's a chance you might go on a 3-month stress leave. And most employers that have benefits will pay you 100%, the benefits will, for that 3 months that you're away. We usually call these stress leaves. And they're stress leaves that when people take them, they know at the end of it, if they haven't found another job, they're going back into the same shark tank that they left 3 months earlier. So this is very tragic. There is a study that's been going on, a longitudinal study, going on longer than any study I know of. It started in 1938. A group at Harvard University started looking at what makes people happy. And so now they have 85 years of data, and it all comes down to, this is going to be, what I'm going to say is more important than the diet you might be eating. Yeah, eat well, it's good. It is more important than exercise. So exercise lots. This will help improve your health. The number one factor is positive relationships. If you have positive relationships in your life, it is going to increase your happiness and longevity more than any of the other factors you might think of. And so when we look at this, that our happiness is so contingent on our connections with others, and knowing that 70% of our happiness at work is because of our boss, it doesn't take much to put these together, that we need to start training people to be in charge of others. It doesn't really matter what a manager or boss knows. Skills are what people under that boss or manager have to do the job that needs to be done. The manager needs to have high emotional intelligence. And if he or she doesn't have it, it doesn't matter how many skills they have. They're going to come across as someone with mild autism, and they're just not going to connect to others. And you're going to be sitting there in your chair thinking, what the, and you fill in the blank. It doesn't have to be this way. And so I created an acronym, which I use also for talking about child rearing, because really our psychology begins with the people that raised us. So if we turned out to be good people of good character and we have reasonably good mental health, well, I'd like to pat the back of your caregivers, mom and dad or others, that helped you develop this kind of character. That's really, really important. How many of you know someone by the name of Brad? Do you have a friend named Brad? If not, I want you to make up a friend named Brad, okay? Because I want to tell you what Brad stands for. It's an acronym that I created. And in the context of workplace settings, the B is for belonging. We need to feel a sense of belonging. You could be making $300,000 a year, and if you don't feel like you belong, you're not going to be happy. So this is something, again, incumbent upon employers and bosses, our frontline people that we report to. The R is for recognition. Most of us don't get enough praise and recognition in our lives. How many times do you hear someone say, "You really did a great job on that"? Bosses are quick to jump on us when we mess up, but they often don't recognize us nearly as often as they should. The A stands for acceptance. When I started as a professor at the University of Calgary in 2001, the first week I was there, this is absolutely honest, 2 secretaries pulled me aside and they said, "Kevin, we really like you, but be careful who you tell that you're gay." And I thought, well, this is going to be real easy, given that I was hired to do gay studies primarily. What was even more disheartening as the years went by is eventually, but it took at least 10 years, people would start coming up to me in my faculty to say, I'm gay too. I've just never felt safe here. I always thought I was the only gay person in the block. And I kind of liked it that way, so it's like, now buzz off. I'm the only queen. There's only room for one queen in a room, and I was the queen. But I never felt accepted. And so that's what the A stands for in Brad, is employers have a lot to do whether we feel accepted or not. And then the D stands for design. And we can create work settings that are very, very accommodating, refreshing. I went into my ex-wife's office, which I hadn't seen, just yesterday. I was there. She had to do check runs. It was the most sterile environment I've ever walked into. I thought I'd last one day in this environment because it's not made for people. It's made for productivity, and yet if you don't speak to people first, productivity is going to suffer. We know that for a fact. So we have to use Brad. So designing our work settings, even if it's a factory, there's a way to make a factory so that the jobs don't have to feel quite as bad as they do. And part of it is knowing, let's say on Friday at the end of the work week, you're going to get together with your colleagues and you're going to share a refreshment and have a few laughs. And that, you know, on Monday morning when you go to work, everybody's going to get together just to talk, to rap, and for the boss to give you a few words of encouragement that you all matter, that sort of thing. So let's pump us up first thing Monday morning. But design also means we have to design policies that protect people of diversity. And those policies have to be enforced. So design also has a punch to it. We can be, you know, we can create as much acceptance, belonging, and recognition, but if people are not protected by policies and they're not enforced, there's going to be people that get left behind. Mm-hmm. People like me in 2001.
So we all need to make sure we have a Brad.
Brad.
Absolutely.
Keep your Brad.
Keep your Brad. Gary, I want you to jump in on this because from your perspective and from your background, do employers have enough education And let's not forget, they've got to be looking at themselves because they have bosses too, and they need to make sure that their mental health is being taken care of. But do you feel that they are knowledgeable enough? Do you feel that they are going into this with a plan? But then, as Nick has pointed out, as Kevin has pointed out, as Deri's pointed out, taking into account the employee that they have and what their specific needs might be. In what you've seen from my God to what's boggled your mind to where we need to be to where we still have to go, what would you say?
Ooh.
I've thrown a lot at you,
Yeah,
haven't I?
no. Actually, that's pretty much exactly what I wanted to talk about.
I read
Frankly,
your mind.
I don't think that we are anywhere near prepared. And I think there's multiple reasons for that. One is just straight up over medicalization. Like mental health, in order to hit the bar where you're diagnosed with something is so high, but people struggle with mental health, with all sorts of issues around that, grief, trauma, family disruption, all of the things that addiction, substance use, right? Problematic substance use, all these things. To get a diagnosis, which is usually the bar before then you get accommodation and all those HR things, right? Workplaces are just very ill prepared. So that time's up?
No,
Or-
you're still good. We
Okay.
still have 20 minutes
All right,
or so.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all
We're
right.
just giving you a little background ambiance.
Oh, that's very nice. Soothing, actually. So I think that is one problem, and I mean, I certainly can't speak for all of CMHA over a 105-year history, but I mean, even talk about parity with the healthcare system, about recognizing mental health as in the same light as a physical health issue. I mean, if you go back far enough, and I remember actually, like I said, 23 years ago when I was at the Schizophrenia Society, we were still trying to convince people that mental health issues weren't magical or spiritual, like demonic sort of possession. And so, saying, oh no, it's health, it's a healthcare, it's an illness. It was a huge step in the right
And
direction.
how did that affect, once you're able to get there,
Yeah.
how did that affect then getting actual access to supports? Because that's the other aspect of it. Once you get that diagnosis,
It's terrible. It always has been terrible.
Right.
The stories that I heard 23 years ago from family members trying to get help for their loved ones are the exact same stories I'm hearing today. And it doesn't matter whether you're in Edmonton or Calgary or Winnipeg or Toronto or frankly anywhere across North America. This is a common issue, and it always has been, right? Accessing services, and a lot of it has to do with the bar you have to hit in order to get, like usually when people think about mental health, they're thinking psychiatry, they're thinking hospitals, they're thinking, that level of care. But mental health, for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, people have dealt with mental health through the interpersonal connections with their families and with their communities. That's how we've dealt with it. We've lost that. We've lost that as a society. And so when you're saying for whatever the 85-year academic study, essentially validating what our cultures have known for a long time, right? Which is that our mental health, our well-being comes from our communities. And so actually reminding ourselves of that, but then how do you create workplaces that also embody that?
Can I just say?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to, what you said about designing the system and about how you create workplaces that can do those things. The challenge that I find in my work is that we can create these systems, design these systems, but the people who are still running these things are not equipped to actually
Right.
manage and maintain those systems.
True.
And how do we train them? We really need to think about what are the leadership competencies that people need to have before they can manage people. You know what I mean? How are managers building meaningful relationships with their staff? Do we even know how to do it? And I would suggest that no, managers come in and I have this list of duties I have to do, and you're going to go do them. And
Yep.
I don't know, I'm not saying everyone's like that. We all have some good managers, like you said, and some good bosses. But we can build and design the systems. But we really need to change the way we think about the work. And if we're going to design a system, that requires us to say, are the right people in place to actually manage these systems?
And
And how do we make sure we get the people
Yeah.
the knowledge or the training or whatever they need to be able to do the job? And do they even want to do it? You know what I
And
mean?
how about having the right people
Yes.
in that leadership position, in those managerial positions that do have proper representation of the employees and of their specific needs, where they can actually not be, well, we've got a representative at the table, and you all know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Oh yeah, we got a representative at the table. We tick that off the box. That person can actually make concrete decisions on how they can make the workplace environment more inclusive, more equitable, and safer. So that if I have a problem and I say to my boss, you know what, I've kind of been covering the flood situation that we're seeing, and the fire situation that we're seeing in BC, now there's floods in Edson, Alberta, et cetera. I've been doing that for the last few weeks, and I've seen people completely devastated and losing their homes. Can I have a day and feel comfortable enough to say that? And if I can't have that, then do we have the right people? I mean, you can have 50 programs, and I can take every single one of those courses. But if I can't do anything with those courses, or I can't lean on anyone at work who, the managers have to, mandatorily take those courses, then what's the point? And to me, I kind of see that as a blind spot.
Yes.
The blind spot that we have in the workplace. You want to say something?
Like 150% on that, getting the right people in those roles, and helping all of us, again, to see the value of these skills, many of these soft skills, what that actually creates in the other person. And I believe the leaders that I work with, I ask them to be vulnerable with their team. In other words, be in your staff meetings, talk about your mistakes. In your, when you're sitting around the lunchroom, talk about something personal that happened to you that was, really tough for you, and how you got through that. What I found since I came out of the closet with the suicide of my husband at just 8 months. I didn't come out of the closet, and it happened in 1987. I didn't come out of the closet until 2013, because I had to tell my children who I had at that point in time. But it was always there. Once I came out about that, I have people constantly coming out to me, so to speak. And similarly, when I wrote this book about what I went through in 2020, I have so many people being more vulnerable. Leaders need to do that. Because I bet you, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but there's not one person in this room who would say, I have never experienced a challenge to my mental health, right? Not one single human being. So if we all just normalize it, it is normal. It's part of being human. Addictions only happen because there's some pain under there, right? We're all human. We've all experienced stuff. If we just normalize it, and the leaders I work with, of course, there's some who shouldn't be there. We all know that.
Yeah.
But I look after those. No, I'm kidding. We do what we can. But everyone can learn, even those who aren't sure, they believe it. Oh, we can all learn. But the mass of us, we can all change that by being more vulnerable ourselves. Leaders, for sure.
I want to steer away from my questions here, and I apologize that I'm doing that because I'm listening to what you guys are saying. So hopefully you'll go on this path with me. I don't want to run out of time, so if you can make it brief, I want to ask each one of you what your definition of safety is when you're going to work. Kevin, your definition of what that is when you're in the workplace.
My definition would come down to Brad, that I feel I belong, I feel recognized, I feel accepted, and that there's a design that makes me feel comfortable.
Gary?
Yeah, I have to say Brad. Like, really, it's Brad.
Brad?
Yes, for Brad.
Yeah.
Nick?
I would say parts of it is Brad, but as a black man, I bring other things to the table. And
Yeah.
as a black woman or someone who might be gay, Brad might work now. It probably wouldn't have worked back then because you may not have had the confidence to even come to work and be who you are, be your whole self and bring yourself to work. It was a long time before I went to work and actually tried to talk Jamaican. And I'm born in Jamaica. I'm an immigrant here too, because I didn't want anyone to see that side of me. But actually, that's a side of me that's actually probably the most fun.
And it's
Probably.
important.
You know, yeah, like
It
you know,
is
like
so
probably-
important.
No, seriously, and so I'm saying yes, Brad is great, but for people who have who bring other things to the table, like women, people from the LGBTQ2+ community, people who may be trans, like anyone who comes from who has another thing they have to deal with, and I always feel bad for people with disabilities, what I mean, especially hidden disabilities. Like, how do you, like, Brad works to a degree, but the thing you really need is to me, safety means that me and my manager, who I report to, we have a meaningful relationship. That doesn't mean we go out and drink every night or whatever. It just means that that person and me, he knows me or she knows me or they know me, and I know them in a way in which I'm very comfortable to say, hey, you know what you just said. I've been doing the floods, I've been doing the fires for 2 weeks. I just need a break, and that boss says, I got you. You know what I mean? Go.
Yeah.
Like, that's when I feel that there's psychological safety, when I'm not worried about all the other things. And I trust that the person who's making decisions on my behalf actually cares about me.
Yeah.
And cares about my well-being. And that takes a while to build that trust. And it's a trust-building piece we have to do at work. And I think as leaders, and as employers, we have to lead that work. And we need to model that behavior. And when people come to work, ask them how they're doing, how their weekend went. Like, just say good morning every day. Like, I had a boss who came to work every day and just walk by the people who put the morning show on and never say anything. Just go straight into her office every day. And so one day I said to her, how do you walk into the office every fucking day and walk right by the people who get up every day at 3 o'clock in the morning to put their show on the air and don't even say good morning to them? Because as a Jamaican, you don't walk into a room without saying good morning to every single person in the room.
Even
That's
if you
just our
don't know
culture.
them.
You know what I mean? And so when I had that conversation with her, she goes, oh, well, I'm reading my phone. Well, put your phone down for a fucking second and just go say
Human
good morning
beings.
to the people who put your show on every day.
Absolutely.
And to me, it's just unbelievable that that's a place where you don't feel safe.
Well, it's funny that you say that. When I worked
Sorry about the language, people.
No. When I worked at Omni Television, and Rogers ended up buying City TV, and so Omni and City were in the same building. And there were a number of microaggressions. I won't get into that. But what shocked the City staff was when you walked in, you said, hey, good morning. And they were like, what? And I said, good morning. And I said, if you got a sweet tooth, we have this running pumpkin that's on my desk. There's always candy in there. You're welcome to it. They're like, oh, okay. And they were shocked because it was like, go, get your work done. Go, 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 go. But it still exists in newsroom. I do have a boss that, he's in his office all the time. And the office is funny, it has windows. And you can see him in there, and you'll walk in, but you're like, yeah, I'm just going to keep on walking. But you say hi to everybody else, even if you don't know them. Carrie, what's safety mean to you?
So safety means to me, and I think it's woven in, Brad, for sure, but it means that I can be who I am, and that may change from time to time, but that I can be my whole self. And I was just sitting here thinking as you were speaking about we've all probably known leaders as well as others, but who walk by without saying good morning and or whatever the case may be. And my experience with those people is they're the ones who most need us.
Yeah.
They're the ones that the most in pain in some way. And often that person who's all by themselves at the other side of the room or who has a reputation for being really soily is exactly the person who needs someone to just sit down with them. And I love working with those leaders, actually, but I try to look at it as
I'll
an
bring you by
invitation.
CBC for a little bit then.
CTV is good too now.
But I don't love working with those people at all. I'm going to be honest with you because I think people who at that level are smart enough to know better. And I think
Well,
it's
if
a
they've
choice
gotten
they're
to that
making.
leadership position.
I meant
they should.
working with as in.
I get you. I know what you mean. I know
like
what you
can
mean.
mold-
No, I know what you
can
mean.
do some
Yeah.
molding.
Like you want to help fix them. Yeah.
Okay, how much time do we have? Okay, we've got about 10 minutes or so left. For me, just really quickly, safety, and I think a lot of women and women of color are going to maybe relate to this. I want to walk into a room and not feel like I have to prove myself.
Yeah.
Because, hey, ladies, we do it every single darn day. Even if you've been working in that. That's right. Even if you've been working there for 10 years, you still walk in, you're in a meeting, and you're going to sit, you're going to speak up, and you don't want it to be like, I'm not going to say anything. You want to be able to know that you have a voice, and it's a voice that they want to hear. To me, that is safety. We're not there yet. And I'll be honest, I wish Brad was there, but Brad's not there yet. Maybe he will be for us at
Getting
some
closer.
point. He's getting there. We just had to kind of like, break down the wall or kind of get him in there. I want to, when it comes to mental health and diversity, is there a label because of the diversity? Do you feel that there is a label insofar that you will, when we talked about the microaggressions where we're saying, oh, well, let's see now, and I can give you an example, for example. Again, and I know we give the sort of the journalism examples, but you walk into the newsroom and they kind of know what your background is, but they make the assumption, they assume you're probably going to tackle something a particular way because of your background. And you go, born in Winnipeg, man. I was born and raised in Canada. My parents are from India, but I was born and raised here. So when they say, the way that you do it is not the way we do it, and I go, how is that different? How do we get past that? Because that in itself is taxing on a person's mental health. Kevin.
Well, that's a very interesting question, research has shown that everybody, has biases. So prejudice is universal.
Mm-hmm.
For most of us, it's a bit ethnocentric. We tend to judge, for example, other cultures by looking at our own culture first. So we look at other cultures and see things that are wrong with it. But we also have the bias, cognitive bias of stereotyping. So we stereotype people. It helps to keep information neatly categorized in our brains. And so I think what you're speaking to is stereotyping. You might be stereotyped because you're a female. You might be stereotyped because you're a person of color, because you're indigenous, because you're LGBTQ+. And stereotypes can be both positive and negative, but it's still a way of oversimplifying us, right? What I find super tragic is, if we look at female employees in the world, this is 2022 statistics, which group of women in the world are the most stressed out employees? And it turns out to be Canada and the United States. We're a number one place, and as an overall workforce, we're the second most stressed in the world. We're tied with China. And so why is that? Why are we driving people this way?
And I feel that we're doing it more. So, I want to make sure I want to make sure I can fit in one more question. But so, what are your thoughts here? And I know you're going to tell me. I know there's some experience that's going to be coming from that one. But what are your thoughts here? How do we remove the label? Because I feel that our experience is so critical in helping employers get it right.
So I strongly believe that there's a generational lens. In fact, even the idea of labeling and needing to compartmentalize aspects of people's identity and to be able to kind of like throw them in a bucket is something that previous generations or like older generations kind of do almost like instinctively, whereas the younger generation doesn't do that. I mean, I think the fluidity of gender nowadays is kind of case in point, but I mean, there's so many other examples. People, like even ethnicity, right? And there's just like mixed, and there's just so many different ways that people define themselves, and they do define themselves. So even, and I think beyond that, I mean, just with the pandemic, and certainly just that sort of the universality of people just tired and feeling the mental burden, there's no longer a need to label. I think that, I mean, once we get into the medical aspects and then that's a different story. But I think that we are going to see a big difference. I mean, between the baby boomers and Gen X and the millennials, it's like a line going up in terms of the level of understanding, and frankly, the workplaces that where you see the less kind of conflict with the younger generation and the way they think and the way they understand the world. Those ones are probably going to be more like the kinds of workplaces that we're talking about than the ones that are a little bit more archaic and a little bit more grounded in an older time.
Nick, what do you think? And where you and I work, we know it's a huge benefit to have someone of a different background because of what we
massive.
cover. And making sure that we get things right, which is so extremely important. The number of times that you have to correct someone, whether it's pronunciation, whether it's understanding the culture, the background of a story that they need to know is very critical. But how do we take what is a positive and not then have it become a negative for us because we are, I don't want to be known as, oh, you were the first South Asian woman to anchor said show. I don't want to be known that way, but we are often, quote, celebrated that way.
Well, first I will say that if we're still celebrating the first anything in 2023, we're a failed society.
We are. We
So
just celebrated
I'll
the
just
first
say that.
Indigenous woman anchoring
Yeah, I know,
a show.
it's actually embarrassing, and we shouldn't actually say that. And when people get those roles, at my workplace, I try and counsel our PR people to think, like, we should lead with why we hired them, what their experience is, what they bring to the table, not lead with who they are, because we're also setting them up for failure, because then the people who read it think, oh, well, they only hired her because she's the first Indigenous person or the first South Asian person. And so we don't want people thinking that. We want to think that we hired them because she's made an award-winning program. She's an unbelievable journalist. Like that's the reason why. So we should lead with that.
Yeah.
I think when you see the picture, in most cases we can tell that that might be the first Black person, the first Indigenous person. Like, we could probably tell, but we don't. It's not information that makes the hire better. What makes the hire better is the qualities why we hired them, and then we need to. So that's just my little pet peeve around that. I will say one other thing though that you brought up a little bit just before, how you prefaced the question around the kind of stigma around coming out, or like, you know, being a South Asian woman. But I would say, as a person from a particular culture, like, I come from a culture, and I heard it this morning from one of the speakers. I think this is a woman who's sitting right here, who we don't go to psychiatrists or go to counselors.
We don't talk about our problems.
We don't do all that stuff. And so there's that on top of, that's layered on top of everything else. And so even if the help is available, we may not take the help.
Yes.
And I think as a manager, if you're managing people, you need to have some cultural fluency to understand that. And you have to think, well, how do I support these people? Because they don't want to be embarrassed in their community or be seen differently in their community as being weak or whatever they say in certain communities. But that's, again, where I always lean back on. It's who is running those shops and who those people are, and making sure they have the competencies that are needed to do the job in the way in which they're supporting people, so that they can feel like that we can call them Brad, you know what I mean, or call them whatever acronym we need to call them. But that's the part that is challenging for me, because there's people I don't think I can move, you know what I mean, like in the way they think. And then we're promoting people, as you know, in our world, because they're great journalists, but they're actually not great managers of people. And they're never going to be great managers of people. And that's where the problem is, and we need to kind of break that systemic cycle and actually hire people. Like you said, if I'm managing the newsroom, I'll take investigative unit. I don't need to be a great investigative journalist to manage the investigative unit. I need to be a great manager of people, because the journalists are great journalists.
Let them do their jobs.
Yes, and I'll do my job. Get you the resources you need to do our stuff. And so, until that changes, it's a long road.
I'm going to give the last word to you before we have to wrap up here.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I don't know if this will make sense. I wanted to tell you a story from when our daughter went to the Blue Bombers, go Bombers, football field to watch them practice when she was in about grade 6. So she comes home from that. My husband came home from work. He is, like me, a baby boomer. And he said, so, Allie, were there a whole bunch of big black guys there today? And she said, oh, Dad, black, blue, green. Because guess what she's talking about?
Their
jerseys.
So I wanted to pick up on what Gary said, because I think he is bang on that I have so much hope for the the young leaders.
Yep.
I completely,
Well, so do I.
I am coaching leaders now who are 29, the same age as my daughter, who get it. So I have these conversations with them. They're on it. They're on board. And, you know, as far as moving, not necessarily older, but other leaders, I find that other leaders know that those leaders, those enlightened ones, get it. And so we're pulling, we're not pushing them, we're pulling them toward that as well. But I agree that they're, the young leaders of today, we got to nourish them and nourish all of you, because I see lots here, just to keep doing your thing, because you're all teaching us how to be better leaders.
Absolutely.
We'll help break down some of those barriers, and we'll let you guys kick it down for us. How's that? You guys are all wonderful. Thank you all so very, very much for coming today and sharing your stories and being so open and direct, because I think that is the only way when we're talking about mental health, when we're talking about supporting each other, is when we can say, you know, hi, my name's Angie, and I'm having a bad day, and I need you to, do you have a minute? And it's okay to say that. So, ladies and gentlemen, our panelists, they're fantastic. I hope you learned something from them today. I hope you grab them afterwards and chit-chat with them a little bit, because they have such great things to offer you. And thank you always for inviting me back onto the stage. I think I'm back again tomorrow morning, so we'll talk climate. Thank you guys so much.